Learning lakes and lands. A conversation with Dane County Executive Jeo Parisi this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. The county has a new budget with a slew of priorities deserving attention, which we will give them. And we will continue our conversation on racial disparities in our community. As I welcome to For the Record, the freshly bearded Dane County Executive Jeo Parisi.
Thank you.
It's November, or December. I mean,
December. Yeah.
It's the first time you've done this?
It is. It's the first time I've had a beard since it's been this color. Last time I had it, it was black. But
just in case
changed.
anybody doesn't recognize you, I feel like we better make that clear. Start with the budget, Joe. Now, I mean, almost a month gone. I thought it was, again, a fairly smooth process, looking back over history and some of the more contentious budgets. But maybe just if you could talk about it in terms of the priorities for county government. What does it represent? Yeah.
Well, this budget, we really focused a lot on young people. And when I say young people, I mean from birth up through high school age. I think it's one of our jobs in government, and I think as a society, is to do everything we can to provide opportunity, access to opportunity for everyone. And that's been a big topic of conversation, as it should be, not only in our community but across the country. And one of the issues that we look at is helping young people get a fresh start right from the beginning. When we look at some of the challenges that people have in school, and you and I were talking before the taping about what we refer to as the achievement gap.
Right.
Really, we have more and more people referring to that as an opportunity gap, and I like that frame. I like talking about it as an opportunity gap, and our goal of being making access to opportunity available to everyone in our community. So when we look at achievement in the schools and the opportunity to achieve in schools, so often, if we look at what's happening in the high school, we can trace back its origins to middle school and then back to elementary school, et cetera. So a little over a year ago, I asked our Department of Human Services to talk within themselves, within their own organization, and with partner organizations to look at what we can do from a county perspective to help address this opportunity gap in our schools. I mean, there's a lot of great work being done in the schools right now, and I'm a big fan of Jen Cheatham, and I think she's really done a great job of getting our community together and focused on what needs to happen inside the schools. But at the same time, we also need to look at what's going on in the children's homes and in their neighborhoods and in the communities. Because if you're going to school hungry, if you don't have a stable home to stay in, if there's violence in your home, if there's poverty, that's going to impact how much you're going to be able to achieve in school. So we put a partnership together a little over a year ago, a pilot program called the Early Childhood Zone, and it's around the Leopold School attendance area, where we bring support in from the community and our partner organizations, Dane County and the United Way, and we support families who are in challenging situations in that attendance area, and not just the kid, but the parents. And we try to identify the situation as early as when the mother is pregnant to help that family get the support they need to become self-sustaining. Are they having challenges with finding work? Is there drug and alcohol? Is there counseling needed in a home? Something like that. So we work with the families, try to get their situation stable, try to get mom and dad education, job training if they need it, then try to get them connected with a job, and so that the young people then are in have the opportunity to take advantage of what we have to offer and some of the great programming that the United Way has to offer, with our goal being getting those kids enrolled in 4K, having reached the milestones we want them to be at, so that they can get a start right from the beginning, equal with everyone else, so they're not starting out behind the 8 ball.
Makes sense, but Joe, explain why this is a uniquely Dane County initiative, as opposed to the city. And I think it's important because I think Jen Cheatham is saying we're going to focus on what the schools can do, and we're going to count on the city to do what it does in the neighborhoods and the county to do what it does. But why is this a county initiative? Yeah,
most of what the county does in this area relates to human services, relates to supporting families and helping people get ahead and get a strong footing. It's our bailiwick. To put it in perspective, we have over a $500 million budget, a Dane County budget. Half of our budget is in the human services realm. that's equal to the entire budget of the city of Madison. So we do human services, we support families, we help people who have challenges. And so it's our niche, and so we want to do what we do best and get involved in the area where we think we can help the most.
So just again, in the context of the budget, this was a strategic decision to focus on kids and families' early childhood stuff in this particular budget.
Yep. So the 2013 budget was the one that contained the early childhood zone in the Leopold attendance area. And our initial analysis of that is so positive that in the 2014 budget, we added 2 more childhood zones. And because we are county government and countywide, one is in Sun Prairie and one is in Verona. And again, we're doing this in partnership with the United Way, and at the same time, we're working with a delegation at the United Way to look at early childhood in general and to see if a model like this, potentially augmented or tweaked a little bit, is something that we might want to try to take countywide at some point.
Right.
So we're focusing on young children. We're focusing on this, but there are other areas we're focusing on too.
Yeah, tick some of the other budget items off before we leave.
Okay, mental health intervention teams. One of the issues that is a challenge in our schools is there's increasing challenges with mental health crises and mental health issues. And this is what I've learned when I go out and talk to our Joining Forces for Families organizations. That's a county-sponsored, basically decentralized social services throughout the community that works with partners, works with the school social workers, law enforcement, teachers, etc. And what we're finding is more situations happening in classrooms throughout the county. Say a child's having a mental health crisis, a chair is being thrown, a punch is being thrown, something like that. And the school doesn't always have the resources necessarily to deal with that. So often law enforcement's called in. So then you get law enforcement involved. So we've created 2 mental health crisis intervention teams. Again, one in Verona and one in Sun Prairie, and then we added one for a Madison school also. And these teams will consist of 2 mental health professionals, and they'll be there for basically 2 reasons. One, if a mental health crisis occurs, there's violence, instead of calling law enforcement right away, these folks will be a resource for the school to turn to, and they can go and help de-escalate the situation, and then get that child and their family connected with services, many of which are already available, that can help them, appropriate services. And when we're not in crisis time, these teams can work with the schools, with law enforcement, with families, in identifying young people who may be having challenges and helping identify those challenges earlier and getting them connected to the appropriate services, and also helping to train the teachers and others on how to de-escalate situations and how to recognize when a child might need some additional resources.
Yeah. Hit on the contribution to days quickly, would you, Joe?
Okay.
Because I think it's a significant piece of money, but it's also a significant policy priority.
Yeah, it is. As you know, Domestic Abuse Intervention Services initiated a capital campaign to build a new facility because they're, unfortunately, they're way beyond capacity and they have to turn people away, and that puts people in immediate danger. And they've been in the middle of a very successful capital campaign, but they have a lot to raise. And so I checked in with them as we were putting the budget together, and they were still about $2 million short in their capital campaign. So we decided to put that $2 million in our budget so we could pay off the remainder of their capital campaign. They still need to raise funding for their operating budget. So, anyone listening, I hope please continue to support DAYS. But as far as bringing this project, this building project, to completion, I felt it was important that the county step in, provide that $2 million so we can get that shelter built so DAYS can continue to do the work they need, and that so fewer families will be put in danger every night.
Is that a precedent, Joe? I don't remember county government making this kind of a contribution to a capital campaign.
Dane County government, I don't believe, has ever done it before. It was done once before, I believe, in Wausau, and because when I was in the legislature, there was a bill that came by that came through that allowed county bonding to be used to help domestic violence shelters, because usually we're not allowed to bond for something like that. Like
Sure.
we can't come and help organizations like that. It's against the bonding rules. But because I was aware of that, that clause that allowed us to do that, I asked our folks to look into it. And yeah, it is unprecedented. Certainly that amount is unprecedented. $2 million is a lot of money, but nothing is more important than this cause and the operation that Days runs. So
Yeah.
I felt that it was important to put it out there, and it was wholeheartedly supported by the board and the community.
And if you had to pick one other, would it be the land? Maybe the land acquisition as a budget priority?
Yeah, you know, I could talk all day about the stuff for kids,
Right.
and we can do more of that someday too. But you know, another obviously a huge challenge in our community, and something that's extremely important to everyone in our community, is our lakes and keeping our lakes clean. And so one of the challenges that we have is phosphorus pollution.
Yep.
And phosphorus runoff comes from many different sources. It comes from farm fields. It comes from urban areas.
Yep.
So we have a lot of different programs aimed at mitigating that. And so one of the land purchase pieces of this is I set aside $2 million to be used to acquire lands that are high phosphorus runoff, like big impact. For example, you might have while most of our farm operations are very responsible, we unfortunately still do have some folks who may technically be in compliance with rules, but they might have a farm that's right up against a stream, cows going into the stream runoff, and we can get our biggest bang for the buck preventing phosphorus runoff, in some cases by buying one or two of these farms and mitigating that, either turning them back into wetlands or doing other practices.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about racial disparity and about the manure digester when we come back right after this. I am back with Dane County Executive Jeo Parisi, and we're talking about the 2014 Dane County budget, among other things. You mentioned a number of things, Joe, the opportunity gap or achievement gap, getting kids ready for school early. All of these issues have to some degree a component of diversity connected to them. And in the context of the Race to Equity report, which I've been talking to people about on this show for the last 6 weeks or so, and you know, what I consider to be just the damning numbers of showing racial disparity in our community. Yep. To what degree do these budget priorities even begin to get at those disparities?
Well, they do. A lot of these disparities, I would say most of them, unfortunately, have very deep roots, and it's going to take efforts like this to turn them around. It's not something we can do overnight. So, I mean, some of the things we just talked about are aimed at getting at disparities directly and indirectly. There's an area of disparities, however, that I've been dealing with for a long time since I was in the legislature, and that has to do with disparities in incarceration.
Right.
Where this is a statewide and a nationwide issue, but it's huge also in Dane County. We have some of the highest racial disparities in incarceration. And when the disparities really started to show up across the country were in the 80s and the 90s, when we had the so-called tough on crime, war on drugs, war on crime laws that had mandatory minimum sentences. They took away discretion from judges, and they came down disproportionately on people of color. You know, so you can look at studies that show that African American teenagers and white teenagers may smoke marijuana at the same rate or do drugs at the same rate, but who's getting caught and getting a record in the criminal justice system? African Americans. And so what we saw is a huge increase not only in the overall population in our jails and prisons during the 80s and 90s, but we saw disparities just take off. And we're at a situation now where it used to be that the main drivers of the prison population were these new offenses for these and repeat offenses for these tough on crimes, 3 strikes you're out. But right now what's driving our prison population is failure during extended supervision, which we used to call parole. People are given sentences with long terms of extended supervision. They're monitored, and if they mess up one time, even a minor infraction, they're back in the system. They're back in the jail. You combine that with a number of tough on crime, and I say that in quotation marks because I don't think they are tough on crime. I don't think they're smart on crime, but a number of laws that have passed in the legislature that make it virtually, if not literally impossible for anyone with a record to get housing, to find employment, et cetera, to get back on their feet once they've been released. And it's very tough. So reentry is what we call the journey back once someone's been released from incarceration. Reentering society again is a very challenging position for many people to be in, especially if you got involved in the system when you're young, you have a long rap sheet, you've been in and out. It's very tough. And we have to address that if we're going to address the disparities in incarceration. So in my 2014 budget, I created the position of reentry coordinator. So our new jail reentry coordinator will be a person who works with people when they come into the jail, and from the minute they come into the jail, start working on their reentry plan. And
so this is in the Sheriff's Department?
This is in our Human Services Department.
Oh, okay.
But they will work in the jail and work with that population. And it's important that it's in the Human Services because of the approach that we want to take. We want to get these people what they need to succeed and make sure that we're working with them to address the root causes of challenges they may have that got them in there in the first place. Are there drug and alcohol issues? Are there mental illness issues, et cetera? But also help them start planning for how they're going to succeed. And it's through our Human Services Department also where we can help connect people with housing, help connect people with jobs, help connect people with job training. And so that we'll have someone who is specifically devoted to helping to ensure that people succeed. Because what we want when someone is incarcerated is we want them to succeed when they're released. And remember, by definition, no one's in jail for more than a year. If it's more than a year, you're going to prison. Right. So everyone who enters our jail is going to come out. And I've always said, when that person comes out, if they move in next door to me, I want it to be a person who's had access to a reentry coordinator and is working on their job skills and working on their job training, et cetera, so that they can be successful.
All right, we're going to talk about the manure digester when we come back right after this. You are looking at the numbers for the 2014 Dane County budget. The one thing I'll add there is that $3.11 increases per month on the average Madison home, so about $37 a year. Levy increase of 3.63%. The author of that budget, Dane County Executive Jeo Parisi, is my guest this morning. I don't remember what you had in the budget relative to lakes issues. But we had in the last month, Joe, as you know, this a problem with one of the manure digesters, which was a real surprise to me because I really thought this was a state-of-the-art technology. How do we understand this, and what's the response to it?
This was, most people have probably heard, but there was a leak in our first digester, the first digester that we put together, and it was a leak that happened in the middle of the night, and the alarms didn't go off for some unknown reason. We're certainly...
There are alarms that should have gone off?
There are supposed to be alarms, and so we're certainly learning what we can from what happened, and our new digester that's opening up has, state-of-the-art, redundant, it's a different design, so it shouldn't, something like this shouldn't happen, but this shouldn't have happened there either. What's important is also to keep it in perspective. We monitor the water there for phosphorus, and our initial analysis shows that about an equivalent of about 30 pounds of phosphorus washed into the watershed through that accident, about 30 pounds. To put that in perspective, that digester has removed about 173,000 pounds of phosphorus since it's been up and running. Now, that's not to say we should ever say it's okay there was a spill, but really the amount of phosphorus that got in was fairly minor, about what naturally washes through there every couple of weeks. But thanks to a big part from the local farmers, who even though they don't own the digester, it's privately owned, they came to help mitigate and put up berms and take the stuff and go spread it where it was good to spread it. So, we're trying to learn what we can from that. Fortunately, it was not an environmental disaster, but we'll certainly make sure that as it starts, if we can learn anything from what happened, that we'll make sure any other protections are put in place. And again, moving forward, the digester that's going to open soon in the town of Springfield is a different design, has many more redundant qualities. But Again, I think it's important for people to remember, well, any accident and any kind of facility can happen and should be looked at seriously, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. That facility has removed 173,000 pounds of phosphorus from our lakes since its inception. So it's really important. It's really an important piece of our efforts to clean up our lakes.
Well, and in fact, it may be that a good thing that we are now hypersensitive about this stuff.
Absolutely.
There was a report in the last couple of weeks again that suggested that our lakes they need help. They need attention.
Yep.
And despite all of the attention that we're giving them right now, they need more.
Yep.
And yet it seems like the commitment is there in a way that it just has never been before.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're right. And you're probably referring to the recent decision of the DNR to refer to the lakes as an impaired watershed.
Yeah.
They can do that. I hope what that does is brings more resources, because we've known there's been a challenge ever since I was a kid growing up here, and that's why the county has taken it on ourselves to spend millions and millions of dollars on lake cleanup. That's going to take probably a decade, because we're dealing mostly with non-point runoff, which doesn't come from any single source, and we have to find different ways to deal with that. Manure digesters are a piece of that. Our partnerships with our farmers are a piece of that, and in farming techniques, in planting buffer strips along streams so when it rains it doesn't run off as much. One piece of my budget that I put in that I learned from meeting with farmers when we were talking about, okay, what are the next steps? I asked them, what are your biggest challenges when it comes to trying to not spread manure in the winter? Because you spread it on the fields in the summer, you can get it mixed in. You don't want to do it in the winter because it rains or snows and it runs off. And the biggest challenge, they said, is storage. They run out of storage space. So I put money in the budget. There's $500,000 in the budget to create, over by one of our digesters, a big storage bin for farmers who run out of space and say it's February and it's not a good time to spread manure. We're creating a space where they can come and store it, and then that will go through the digester and the phosphorus will be removed. So we're looking for real practical solutions like that by working with our farmers, while at the same time continuing to partner with municipalities to help fund the redoing of stormwater outfalls. One of the urban contributions to our pollution comes whenever it rains and the streets and sidewalks, it washes out. We're replacing those with retention basins that filter the water before it goes into the lakes.
All right. We're going to save the jail for another show.
Sounds good.
And as it gets a little closer to talking about the reality of that. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to Jeo Parisi for being here this morning. We're back next Sunday. Until then, have a great holiday. We'll see you next week.